The mid-20th century was a historic time for African Americans, but even before the civil rights movement of the 1960s, men and women of color were making progress on their own. Not as part of a great movement, but as individuals, as solitary voices looking to realize their hopes and dreams. One such individual is Milton Pitts Crenchaw. Crenchaw was born and reared in Little Rock and spent the rest of his life riding the cusp of history. First as a black aviator, then as a flight instructor for the famed Tuskegee Airmen of World War II. After the war, Crenchaw pioneered an aviation program at Philander Smith College and helped integrate bases throughout the South. In recognition of his lifetime of achievements, Crenchaw has been inducted into the Arkansas Aviation Hall of Fame and was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal by President George W. Bush. A son, a father, a pilot, and a teacher, whatever words are used to describe him, Milton Crenchaw is a man of distinction.
I was born 1919, January the 13th. My mother was Ethel Crenchaw, a beautician for wealthy white people in the city. My father was a professional tailor, and then he became a minister later on at Mount Pleasant Baptist Church.
Well, actually, let's go back even farther than that. Now, you were born in 1919, and your daddy was probably how old when you were born? In his 20s?
I imagine so. He was about 27 when he came from Mariana to come to school at Arkansas Baptist College. His father was born in 1853 in slavery.
Okay, so that's when we tell you. Your grandfather then was born a slave.
Born a slave.
In where? Alabama?
I imagine Alabama. I think my people came off of different plantations, and I think that my mother's people came from Hardaway, Alabama. They're about 65 miles east of Montgomery.
Of his mother, Milton remembers a woman who read to him every afternoon and raised him on faith, hope, and love. Of his father, Milton remembers a man who was both opinionated and stern, but motivated to improve the condition of blacks in Arkansas. Milton grew up in Little Rock, spending much of his time on 9th Street, working for his father's tailoring and dry cleaning business. At the time, 9th Street was often referred to as the Line, an imaginary line that separated the white and black communities in Little Rock. Milton loved to go to school, went to church every Sunday, and his best friend was a boy named Harold Torrance. When you were growing up in Little Rock, who were your friends? Who were your best friends? Who did you hang out with?
With the Torrances.
The Torrances. What was his name?
The one my age was Harold Torrance, but his father, Andrew Torrance, was younger, and they had maybe 4 or 5 boys and one sister, and I could go up there and get something to eat all the time, see, so.
They have a good table there?
They had a good table, fantastic there all the time, knew how to cook well. And when a fellow comes up and says, well, what did you guys do? We were Boy Scouts, and we had a meeting down to Wesley Chapel. That was in the Philander Smith College area, but our chapter was down there. And we would go to Hot Springs or go down on the river and spend maybe 2 or 3 days in summertime at one of the camps. And we became good friends there because the Boy Scouts was the best thing that you could possibly get in to stay out of trouble.
Yeah, what did you get out of the Boy Scouts?
One of the nicer things that you learn in Sunday school, almost like you learn in Boy Scout, a foundation on how to be a good citizen. And one of the nicer things about it is that you don't find anyone in the Boy Scout system that were bigoted type individual. Always those that want to help other individuals. So, and I'm a helper more than anything else.
So that you learned that in Sunday school and in the Boy Scouts,
I imagine so.
and at home.
And at home. See, in other words, I'm the only one like me and that came out of my family. The rest of them are much smarter than I thought I was, see, but at the same time, I got more out of my 90 years than I imagine they did. So I'm doing, helping people.
Milton graduated from Dunbar High School in 1936. Dunbar was one of over 300 Rosenwald schools in Arkansas, funded by the president of Sears Roebuck and Company, Julius Rosenwald, to teach the industrial arts to black students. With only one high school in Little Rock for African Americans, Dunbar offered both the facilities and the opportunities that weren't otherwise available to black students. Dunbar also housed the junior college in which Milton enrolled after high school, receiving a teaching certificate in auto mechanics. After graduation, Milton decided to continue his education at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama.
I went to Tuskegee, not knowing anything about what I was going to take, but I had figured that it would more than likely be some type of trade. I like the trades. My grandfather and all of them came over as trade people, so I just followed down. I'm not quite sure what I wanted to be at that particular time, but fate took over and put me in the aviation course. So I just happened to get there at the right time in history to where I became a part of, you had to have finished some either junior college, mechanical school, and I had finished 2 of them, so I was qualified to go into the first one.
So you went into the first flying program that was set up there, and that would have been in 1939 or 40?
I was able to step right in, one of the first classes.
First classes, and so tell me about what kind of training you got, because you'd never been in an airplane, right?
Right. Well, we would go down to Gaither Field, which was next to Maxwell. We were associated with Maxwell Air Base to get the uniforms and everything else, see. We'd go down there first. The first year, we'd drive that 45 miles every other day to learn how to fly at Gaither Field.
So you'd have classes there about flying, and then you'd, every other day, and then you'd go down to
that's right
down to Gaither Field, which
right.
is near Montgomery, I guess.
And then at the same time, Auburn had them now. The technical school had teachers that had been in the Navy, and they had a flight program there. Plus, they had a runway at Auburn, Alabama. One runway. So when we got the second course, we went up to Auburn, Alabama to take training off of that field. Plus, their instructors would come to Tuskegee twice a week to teach navigation and all the other associated subjects that you needed for flying.
So all the training was with Piper Clubs?
Piper Clubs.
Single engine planes?
Single engine, right.
Do you remember the first time you went up in an airplane?
Yeah.
What was that like? Were you scared?
Yeah, scared to death. You know, anything new, it's either you're totally crazy and this is an excitement, or you're nervous wondering, is this thing gonna come unglued, see? So you're not quite sure, but you look at the other guy and you say, if he takes it, I'm gonna take it, see? I wouldn't let him know I was afraid of it, though.
Did you land the plane on your first trip?
No. You just go up there and take it for a while. And after you get up there and he looks back to see if you are scared to death or calmed down, thinking. See, you always think about this thing gonna fall. You know, so some people never get over it. And then others will sit up there and say, well, if I'm gonna die, let me die happy. So we do the best we could. And when you're young like that, you don't pay too much attention to small fries like that.
Milton enrolled in the civilian pilot training program at the Tuskegee Institute and was part of the first class of African Americans to be trained as pilots for the Army Air Corps. Milton excelled in the program, and within a year he was learning advanced techniques such as instrument flying and cross-country navigation. After 2 years of training and countless hours of flight, Milton received his commercial pilot certificate in the summer of 1941. Always interested in teaching, he then decided to get his instructor certificate. But to take the test, Milton would have to go to Birmingham, Without a car, Milton had to walk and hitchhike his way, arriving in a completely different world. With no radio or television, Milton would only learn the news once he reached his destination. Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor, and America was at war. So when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, you were walking down the road.
Go ahead, trying to get to
from
Birmingham.
Tuskegee to Birmingham,
That's right.
which is a distance of how many miles?
100 and some miles, I don't know. But I had taken the first course, and the inspector told me, wanted me to come to Birmingham from Tuskegee to take my first test. I walked up to Birmingham in a hitchhike. And when I got there that Sunday evening, it took me from Friday night to Sunday afternoon to get to Birmingham, 160 miles maybe. And he told me that I can't do it. I said, what's the matter? You told me to come up here. And he said, yeah, but we had Pearl Harbor yesterday. Well, Pearl what? I was on the highway walking. I didn't realize that was the 7th of December. I got out there. My father said, whenever you get in trouble, call on God. And you're talking about a guy praying. Oh, God. All I did was talk to God. And I swear to God, my voice went straight to heaven. So he told me that he couldn't do it because he's going back to Miami to his unit. And there was 20 white guys out there trying to get the same thing, plus me. And he came back after 1:30 and said, I'll fly you, fella, just like that, and took me up in that. And then I had to go and rent an airplane. And then I had to go back and get a parachute. The people in there thought I was totally crazy in the office there, see. A black guy coming in wanting to rent an airplane.
Milton received his flight instructor certificate the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And with the outbreak of war, his flying skills became a valuable commodity. Returning to Tuskegee, Milton became an instructional aviator and pilot teacher to the famed Tuskegee Airmen. Prior to World War II, black aviators were rare and weren't allowed to fly commercially, professionally, or in the service of their country. However, a law passed in 1939 expanding the Army Air Corps also included a provision for the creation of training programs at black colleges. It was under this provision that Milton received his training. Then in 1941, the War Department created the 99th Pursuit Squadron, which would be an all-black flying unit trained at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. While racial segregation still enveloped the United States military, these pilots were the first black aviators allowed into combat. They flew combat missions throughout Europe, first as part of the British-American invasion of French North Africa, and later as bomber escorts. The airmen flew a variety of planes that are most closely associated with the P-51 Mustang. For identification purposes, the airmen painted the tails of their planes red, leading to the common nickname Red Tails.
In the air over Germany, another Nazi myth was being shattered. You couldn't sell prejudice to the 15th Air Force, Mr. Hitler. On a bombing mission over enemy territory, a fighter escort is a mighty comforting sight. You don't ask who the other pilots are or where their grandfathers came from. You know they're Americans, and that's good enough. This man thought it was plenty good enough. As far as he was concerned, this man could fly top cover for him any day.
How many airmen did you train?
Well, we would say maybe we may have had in all less than 2,000, but 992 graduated and left Tuskegee going somewhere.
While issues of racism still existed, the country was at war and resources could not be wasted. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who had an interest in both civil rights and aeronautics, visited the Tuskegee Institute in 1941 in a visible show of support for the black aviators. Brushing elbows with history, Milton met the First Lady as she prepared for her unprecedented flight.
So she happened to come to Tuskegee at one time while we had the airplanes down there, little Piper Cubs at Kennedy Field, which was a grass field, and Chief Anderson asked her if she would like to come, and I have a picture over there showing that where she was getting ready, and I took the stick out of the rear so that she didn't have pants on, had on a skirt, but the stick was right down at the bottom with a cotter pin in there to keep it from coming out. And I took it out, and Chief Anderson flew around Tuskegee, brought her back. In fact, Mrs. Roosevelt had to get the Secret Service to call and find out if it was okay for her to ride with the black pilot.
The Secret Service did not think she should be flying with a black pilot.
That's exactly right.
Did you talk to her while you were?
Yeah, I just spoke to her. In other words, when you're excited, you know, I'll tell any kind of lie that I was up there running the conversation. It wasn't like that. You know, you're just trying to do something the best that you can, not knowing that I was making history at that time.
Eleanor Roosevelt wasn't the only woman Milton would meet at Tuskegee, or the most important. You met your wife at Tuskegee.
Tuskegee. She was down.
What's her name?
She was a Ruby Hockenhull, Hockenhull, from down here at Kerr, Arkansas. What had happened, you'd have boys and basketball tournaments and girls basketball tournaments from, we'll say, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, and other places would come there for tournaments like they do at all the other schools. And it just happened that always somebody down there that knew some of the girls from Arkansas, from Louisiana, from Georgia. So therefore, after a couple of years, you just run into the same one that you saw and like that.
So she was a student there,
yeah,
and a classmate, right. Or were you a trainer by then? Or were you on the faculty?
I was on the faculty.
You were on the faculty. So you were married while you were there?
Yeah, I was married there, and I lived down in one of the faculty houses.
Did you have children while you were there?
I had a boy and a girl. My boy was born all my kids were born in Tuskegee, though.
Milton and Ruby married in 1942 and had 4 children. After the war, Milton returned to Arkansas, where he worked for the Central Flying Service and dusted crops. He developed the first aviation program at Philander Smith College, which he taught for 6 years. A natural in the classroom, be it on the ground or in the air, Milton continued his career as a flight instructor under contract with the military, serving as a civilian pilot training officer from 1953 to 1972 at air bases around the South, including Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Camp Rucker, Alabama, and Fort Stewart, Georgia.
The president in 1947 decided that there would be only one army, the United States Army, and back in 55, that they were fixing to integrate Fort Sill in the rest of the armies. So they sent me down to integrate Fort Sill.
Now, how were you to integrate it? Were you going to be an instructor?
On the staff.
You would be an instructor.
That's right. Not just black folks, from then on, just people.
You were going to be instructing white
people,
guys.
White people.
Well, how did it go teaching white kids? A lot of these kids were probably from the South.
Yeah, yeah.
And did you have a lot of trouble with that?
No, I had no trouble with it. I had a fellow from Minnesota, black, and he came up to my house and told me that he didn't particularly like having a black instructor, and he was going to see the commander about getting him a white instructor because he wanted to get through. And naturally, I told the guy, I said, look, fella, I'm the best God ever made. When they get on me, it's like getting on the New York Yankees, putting on that striped suit. I don't lose nobody. And he said, yeah, but you still came from the South, and I don't want you. So hurt my feelings. Yeah, but at the same time, you get in this particular area, you get easily hurt.
And this is a black guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So you were there 2 years?
I was at Fort Sill 2 years, and we got transferred to Camp Rucker back in Alabama.
Were you doing the same thing there?
Yeah, doing the same thing. Mm-hmm.
Again, flight instruction.
Flight instructor. Flight instructor for the next 29 years at one of the Army camps.
Crenchaw retired in 1983 from the Department of Defense, where he spent a decade as an equal employment opportunity officer. Of his post-retirement life, Milton has kept busy as an advocate for Veterans Affairs and benefits. He speaks regularly at schools and special events, inspiring the young and old alike, telling the story of a boy from Arkansas who learned how to fly.